Welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, Episode 20, Choral Appropriation. Dr. Brandon Boyd from the University of Missouri and I sat down to chat about what seems to be one of the hottest topics being discussed right now online in the choral world, is what constitutes the appropriation of a culture in the context of choral music. We've heard so much in the broader society about what appropriation means, but what does it mean to us in choir? Dr. Boyd and I sit down to discuss this sensitive topic. We don't really make an effort to define what cultural appropriation is for everyone, and I would say in this conversation we don't really make an effort to convince you one way or the other of what appropriation is. The conversation tended to focus more on how we as professionals and we as conductors and educators should communicate about this topic, centering heavily around the idea that we should be giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Neither of us believe that there is a large group of choral directors out there trying to take someone else's culture and profit from it. So if we give each other the benefit of a good starting place, we might have a productive conversation about this topic. I can't believe we're already at episode 20. I am really excited to have my friend Brandon Boyd on the show for this episode. It's kind of a milestone. Before we get too far into it, I want to make sure that you all know that there is an opportunity that is growing, small but mighty, over on Patreon to support the mission of this show directly. For as little as $3 a month, you can become a subscriber. One of the cool things that's going on over there at Patreon is I've been putting out for the last 3 months now, since there are actual supporters over there, some patron-only content. So there are 3 episodes up now, as well as some resources that have gone along with some of the other episodes that the free version of the episodes on your podcast app or on YouTube don't get you access to. So head over there and check that out. It's a way to support the show, but it's also a way to get access to some behind the scenes and some other content. I also want to remind you to take advantage of your Choralosopher status as a listener of this show and head over to the websites of a couple of our sponsors, SightReadingFactory.com. If you have not signed up for that yet for this school year for your classes, it is not too late. Get those kids started. If you're using the free version, I strongly recommend to get the unlimited recyclable version that you can get at a 10% discount with promo code Choralosophy. Also, if you're looking for that ideal piece for your next concert, this show has 2 affiliates that can help you out. RyanMain.com has an awesome concept going on over there with Ryan's Music, where he sells a site license for a piece, which means that once you buy the PDF, it is yours to distribute and copy as many times as you want, which is very innovative in the music publishing, self-publishing world. So head over to RyanMain.com. You can also head to GraphitePublishing.com, which is going to be the sponsor of this next segment you're going to hear before we get to the conversation with Dr. Boyd. Graphite Publishing, it has a lot of different composers on there that are all doing excellent work, and you can use the Choralosophy promo code at RyanMain.com and GraphitePublishing.com to get a 10% discount on your sheet music purchases. Stay tuned for the next segment, which is the October edition of Composer Exposer. This time I have Joshua Shank on, so enjoy this segment, and then right after that will be the conversation with Brandon Boyd. Welcome, Joshua Shank. You are the Choralosophy Podcast hot seat on this installment of Composer Exposer. We are going to expose you to the world of choral music today in a new, personal way. Are you ready?
I am ready to expose myself, yes.
Okay, good. All right, first question in these rapid fire round. What is your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve is people who walk slow on the sidewalk.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is annoying. If you were not in the choral music industry, what would you be doing?
I think I would be a teacher of some sort.
You pick a subject.
Can't be music. Then either history or English.
Oh, okay. That's how I would answer too. I love that. If you could have any 3 people, dead or alive, over for dinner, and it has to be in one dinner party, who would they be?
Hunter S. Thompson, Walt Whitman, and FDR.
Okay, so a history and English party. You'd have a literature and history party. I like it. Okay, so this is where it gets weird. What are your opinions about garden gnomes?
Well, I don't really mind them. I have a really charming Midwestern aunt who, for the longest time, her kids told her that if you saw them in someone's garden, that meant that swingers lived at that house. So she
Really?
told everybody in the family, and she was really had a lot of sort of anxiety about it. So when she retired, I went to a garden store and I got her a garden gnome to put in her garden, just to sort of freak her out a little bit. And
That is hilarious. Okay, so you've been given an elephant. You can't give away or sell the elephant. What do you do with the elephant?
you can't give it away or you can't sell it. I suppose I would put it to work building probably roads in areas that need them to get water or medication to them and places that desperately need them.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, a biological tractor.
Any tattoos?
I have 2 tattoos. They're both abbreviations of cities. Down the back of my arm, I have MPLS, which stands for Minneapolis, which is where I come from. It's a city that gave me a lot of joy and a lot of support over the years. And then my other tattoo is right here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
It says ATX, which is Austin, Texas, which is where I lived for 8 years and got my doctorate and found a spouse and found happiness.
So your body is becoming kind of a map story of your life, in a sense.
Yeah, and I never know what I want to put on there next.
Okay. All right, great. One more. Name a book that you read that has positively shaped your life.
I've been reading the Robert Caro biographies of LBJ recently.
Okay.
And, you know, say what you will about LBJ's term as a president and the things that he got us into and out of and all that stuff. But the way that LBJ number one, the way that LBJ lived his life and got himself out of poverty and then went to war on poverty.
You really like history.
I don't read fiction.
Okay.
It's not that I don't like it, but I haven't read fiction in a very, very long time. That might be residue from grad school. Like it just sort of wrung all the pleasure reading out of me.
Right.
Although I'm sort of dipping back into some pleasure reading.
Awesome. Well, you survived the rapid fire round. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Next question. You've got quite a bit of music on graphite. I noticed. Could you tell us let's say there's a piece that you have on there that you feel like more people should know about because you're really excited about it, and you could tell us about one piece that you've got on graphite. What would that be?
I've been sort of trying to figure out how to get the rights to Khalil Gibran's wonderful book of poetry called The Prophet. And specifically, there's one called On Children. And I wrote this piece for the Minnesota All-State Choir a while back, and it's called Your Children Are Not Your Children. I was trying to think about what this piece was about, because it was going to be, 100 students. It's the mixed choir, SATB. Most of their teachers, right? And then their parents and family that were going to be in the audience. So I found this text, and it's all about the stewardship of raising a child. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. Each phrase, as it builds up one word at a time. Your children are. Your children are not. Your children are not your children. And it sounds like an intellectual kind of gimmick a little bit, but it sort of yields this beautiful growth of the musical phrase over time, and it's nurtured into this sort of full-fledged fortissimo at the end.
That's exciting. Any guesses on when it'll be, like somebody could go online and get it?
It became available about 2.5 weeks ago.
So it's on. It's on there now.
Mm-hmm. It's hot off the presses, so to speak.
Awesome. Anything you've got kind of cooking up next that you're really excited about? Do you have any projects that you're working on?
I'm working on a piece with a new text from a poet. We're collaborating on the concept of Rachel Carson's landmark book about the environmental movement from the 60s. It's called Silent Spring. And it's for the University of Minnesota Morris campus. They're going to take it on tour to Peru. And the title of Carson's book has to do with the fact that if we don't take care of our environment, we'll have a silent spring. No birds will offer their song. And so this poet and I sort of took a broader look at what are the animals that sing, and what would happen if we let those songs be stolen from us. So the mother whale sings a song to her tiny child who is trapped in a fisherman's careless hands, Well,
that sounds really exciting too. Is that going to be an extended work?
That'll be a single song, and The poet that I'm working with is a Spanish speaker, and the choir is taking it to Peru. So they're gonna sing it in Spanish. We're gonna sort of figure out, make sure that there's uh, it's Peruvian Spanish as opposed to
Right.
other sort of colloquial dialects of Spanish. But they're going to take that in the late spring, early summer next year. I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sure everybody's excited to hear that. Well, thank you so much for coming on this segment. It's been really fun, and I will definitely be making sure that people know about your music on Graphite. I've done quite a few of your pieces from the website that are just really stunning and wonderful work, and my students and all the singers that I've had have loved it. So encourage everybody to head over to graphitepublishing.com and check out Joshua's music. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Chris. Take care.
Right. Well, I'm here with Brandon Boyd from the University of Missouri, and Brandon is a choral director there. And I've gotten to know him recently since he came to my part of the country, and he's just an awesome human being and a great arranger and composer in his own right, amazing piano player, and all of these things are just really special and awesome about Brandon. So I'm hoping to pick his brain on some topics today. So welcome, Brandon, to the Choralosophy podcast.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
First, I'd like to familiarize my audience with you, just in case they don't already know who you are. So, could you give us just your background? What got you from your young life to being a professor of choral music at a big university? Walk us through that in the fast forward version of your whole life story.
Sure.
No pressure.
Sure. Oh, thank you. I could say that I remember being a kid, loving music. I remember not wanting to visit any of my grandmother's friends unless they had a piano at their home.
Wow.
That was really important. If they didn't have a piano or she told me they had one just to get me to go, I was very disappointed. Now, I couldn't explain it as a kid because I couldn't even play the piano at that point. But if you just had a piece of furniture that looked like a piano in your house, I was excited about it. And so, as many I, as many people do, they get introduced to music through church, and that's kind of how I got really introduced to it. And two very very special people who I think one changed my complete life, which was a woman by the name of Cora Thorpe, who was our pianist at church, who was going blind, and she made an investment in me because she was losing her hearing. She said to me, because I'm losing my ability to really, continue to do what it is I love, I'm going to invest in you. So she paid for my piano lessons for 5 years or so.
Oh wow.
Because she no longer could play. But then she sent me to her piano teacher, who happened to be blind. And so he was a blind teacher who anybody in the area where I grew up, which was in Florida, took piano with him in Ocala, Florida. He was a very popular teacher and musician in that city. But nonetheless, that's kind of how I got introduced to music. And then, graduating from high school, kind of thinking the only thing you kind of do well is music. So you might try that as a major. And so I did. I went to college and tried it out. And while I was at a historically black college in Nashville, Tennessee State University, I finished there, and I met a man by the name of Jeffrey Ames, who introduced me to the Florida State as a place for graduate work. And he literally made a phone call and made it happen. It was a literal phone call in one of my conducting lessons. And that's how I got introduced to Florida State, and met a wonderful mentor and friend and colleague now, Dr. Andre Thomas, who has been a very fatherly figure, a mentor, and all the other things mentioned. And so, anyway, after finishing my doctorate, the job at the University of Missouri came open. Now, I could not tell you where the University of Missouri was located at that time, but I heard it was in Missouri. And that was good enough. So, that was my first time ever being in the Midwest, Tennessee, not too far away, but very first time being in the Midwest. And anyway, I've been here for 2 years and really have been. Oh, this is my third year, and I love it. Every time someone asks me, do you love how are things going? I just can't help but to say, I do love my job.
That's great.
I do love my job. I love what I do. I love being able to conduct choirs and do some music ed and kind of split right down the middle. That to me is a dream for some people who, like to still keep their hand in conducting, but still teach conducting and
Mhm.
all those things.
So how did this is just gonna ask one other question of background just because I'm curious, and so maybe people listening will be curious too. So you said you started out as like, and I know this too from other conversations we've had, but piano was your first love.
Sure.
So
Mhm.
when did the choir bug specifically hit you?
Um, it hit me. I mean, everybody knows this is my favorite story. Do you want me to tell it? It'll take about a minute and a half.
That's we have no time limit.
Okay. When I went in high school, it was a February because the Bethune-Cookman College Concert Chorale, which was a college nearby, started by Mayor McLeod Bethune, they were coming to my city, and I was sitting out in the audience because one of the ladies in my church said, "You need to go to this concert." And so I sat in the audience, and I'd always played for my high school choir, played, the church and all kinds of stuff. And so I went to this concert, and I was in awe of the concert. Thought, God, this is incredible. The conductor was a woman by the name of Rebecca Steele, who had to be 78 then.
Wow.
And she had been a choir director at two historically black colleges in the state of Florida, which was Bethune-Cookman, where she was currently, and then Florida A&M. At the end of her career, she had taught 66 long years in two colleges, which is
Wow.
a long time. But anyway, I'm saying all that to say she was in the middle of a concert about halfway through and turned around and looked at me, and I was on the second row of the church. It was a full church too, huge church too. And she looked at me and she pointed at me and told me to go to the piano. And I, of course, looked around because I thought something was wrong with this lady because I had never seen her before, didn't know her, none of those things. And the lady with me said, "Go, go, 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 go!" And so I said, "No, she's not talking to me." So anyway, after a couple nudges behind me, because some people knew me, said, "Go, go, go, go to the piano." So I walked to the piano, kind of hesitated, and her accompanist looked at me and said, "Please tell me you know how to play piano." And I said, yes, I do. And so he said, and she's looking at us like, "Come on, let's go, sit down, play." And I'm sitting there at the piano, and I said, "What's the next song?" He said, "The Battle Hymn of the Republic" by Wilhelmsky. And I go, "Oh, thank goodness I knew that because our high school choir sang that." Oh God, that was like, whew. So she lifted her hands and she was ready to go. She had given a downbeat, but I missed the first one. So she gave another one. And so we went on. And nonetheless, we made it through. I stumbled through the little fast section because she went way faster than we ever did. And I think in that moment, she realized that I was not who she thought I was. Nonetheless, that got me a scholarship to Bethune-Cookman College. And that got me an opportunity to do some things because her accompanist also served sort of like an assistant conductor, where they did a lot of sectionals, they did a lot of things like, and that was my introduction into, oh wow, actually taking some control, having some musical liberties.
Uh-huh.
And that was my first introduction into actually conducting. And I hadn't had any conducting lessons or anything like that, but she let me do a lot of things. Um, and then going on to Tennessee State, that's where I really was taken on by a man by the name of Dr. Darrell Nettles, who was the choir director there. And he and Diana Poe, those two people said, "Hey, come on, we see it in you. We see that we see this is what you want to do and want to be." And then Jeffrey Ames gave me real formal conducting lessons.
Uh-huh.
Um, and after 2 years of conducting lessons with him, he said to me, "What's next?" And that "what's next" was, I don't know. Was it going on getting a master's in piano, or was it going on getting a master's in music education, or was it going on to get a master's in choral conducting? And he motivated me to do just that. And that's kind of how I got started. It took about 2 minutes, but
Yeah, no
I
worries.
got it out. Sorry.
So when did the choral arrangement start for you? When did you start dabbling in that?
When I went to Florida State, we took every FSU grad knows this. You take a class called behavior modification. And in that class, there's a big project that you will do, and it's called a self-shaping project. And that self-shaping project decreases one behavior to increase another behavior.
Wow.
And what I wanted to do was to decrease a behavior that I can't say publicly and to increase a behavior that and that behavior was I wanted to write more. I wanted to literally get those thoughts out of my head onto some manuscript because I realized at church every Sunday that I accompanied, you would have to play and make up stuff while people are praying or while people are moving this section and I'm thinking, I'm doing this all the time. Why not go ahead and organize this and make it into an actual formal score? And my very first piece out of that self-shaping project was an arrangement I did of a hymn anthem, a hymn cantata, really, on Praise Him. And it was with organ and had brass and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I put everything but the kitchen sink in it,
Okay.
because it was my first thing. But after that, I will have to say my mentor, Andre Thomas, just motivated me to do more and more and more and more. And that's because I believe he believed that I could do those things. I just needed the technical skills and learn the actual software and then get those ideas out of my head. And the software sometimes is what holds people back, because they really can arrange all these things and do arrange things, but putting into a software, learning that is sometimes a little barrier for people. And I will say that little barrier kind of held me back for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you came to Kansas City and worked with our Contrai Summer Choral Institute, you brought with you one of your arrangements, your "I Want to Be Ready" that you've done.
Mm-hmm. That was the kind of the pilot.
Okay, right. Well, yes, I know it's been changed quite a bit since you published it, which is awesome. We've got the published version now too in our library. So, and one of the things that I kind of spurred my interest in talking to you about some of these ideas that we're going to talk about at this episode related to kind of the way people perceive. I'm going to call this putting your toe into the water of another culture musically to experience it. And one of the story I wanted to start off with was when you came to Kansas City to do that with us. You did it with the kids. You did it. It was also a piece that, for the audience listening, so you get some context, Brandon came to work with a choir, a summer camp choir, basically, is what we do in Kansas City. And these were 14 to 16-year-old kids, and they come from all over the Kansas City area. And he had chosen to put the contrarized professional singers with the kids on this piece. And so there was a chance that Brandon got to come in and work with us on how to perform his piece and how to interpret it. And I remember that experience, Brandon, with you coming in to work with us, the adults, as being so much fun, but also, in a lot of ways uncomfortable, because this is not a style of music. How would you describe it, by the way? Is it almost like a spiritual tune with gospel influences? Is that how you would describe it?
I would. It's a concert spiritual, but like many of the music, lots of music we have, it's always influenced by something. I mean, it's even European. There's a European influence because one is notated.
Right.
There's a score in someone's hand performing this music.
Uh-huh.
So I call it, and I think a lot of people call it, concert music. And it's concert spirituals with an influence of gospel music. It's almost like an entree with something with it. But that might not be the main thing, but there are other things to add to it to make it what it is.
Right. Yeah, and I really appreciated when you came to work with us. It was clear right away, and I'm sure you put yourself in the shoes of a clinician as you walk in and you're working with a group of singers, that you can tell right away this is not music that you really understand culturally. You're going to have to be walked through this. Like, what do we want this to sound like? What do we want this to feel like? But I appreciated that you very much made us feel like we were free to experiment and free to try. And of course, for those of you who can't see us all on this podcast, Contrai is mostly white, and Brandon's bringing this piece, and
Brandon is black. Did you say that?
Yes, and Brandon. Well, your picture is going to be on the main picture of this, so I figured they would see you. But the point being that we were made to feel comfortable dipping our toe in, so to speak, into this music, and not feeling like if we were to maybe do something wrong or interpret something incorrectly, that we were going to be criticized. And one of the ways that I remember you doing that was that you, I don't even remember the context, but you asked some questions of the singers about what their worship experience is like at church, trying to tie some ideas that they might be able to understand to the ideas that you've brought in with this piece. And so to me, it was like the perfect idea or the perfect example of how cultures, whether they be musical or artistic or just in society overall, could, in a perfect world, interact with each other in a way that creates something new, something exciting, and an
Yeah.
experience that both sides can benefit from and both groups of people can benefit from. Uh,
Mhm.
so the in what I'd like to pick your brain a little bit about though is that it seems like with every passing year, I'm going to say from about 2013 to now, it seems to be increasingly harder to do those types of exchanges in a lot of ways, especially for. And this is something I've been reading a lot about in now that my job is one of my jobs is to put on this podcast. I'm constantly reading exchanges between choir directors online because I'm trying to get ideas and trying to keep my
Mhm.
finger on the pulse of how people are
Yeah.
thinking and talking so that I can respond to it in this show. But one of the things that I see a lot is white conductors
Mhm.
expressing their nervousness to say program a piece by Brandon Boyd or program a piece that is not even not from their culture because they're afraid they might get it wrong. And I'm wondering if you've seen that or noticed it too.
Absolutely. And a lot of people will do what I think is is a wonderful thing. Is will say, "Will you come in? Will you talk to my group? Will you
Mhm.
clinic my group via Skype, or will you talk me through the piece? Will you help me solidify some decisions that I've been thinking of, but I don't feel quite confident in it?"
Mhm.
And so I think that's the best thing to do. I mean, anytime I program a German piece, I have some knowledge base about the German language, but I don't have enough, and I don't have the experience and that a person who speaks it firsthand, or maybe even a singer who speaks it firsthand would have.
Mhm.
And so it's just as important that if you don't know a recipe, you go look up a recipe. You don't just make up something. That's going to be a disaster.
Mhm.
The same goes for music of styles that that might not be of your first experience, but maybe you have an understanding, you have an appreciation. Having appreciation is important, but having a real cultural understanding and some historical background, um, figuring out that looking at music like African American music and spirituals, there's an emotional connection there to that music. That if you don't get that, you've lost
Mhm.
92% of it. Okay,
Mhm.
you got all the pitches and rhythm, good and yay for you. I don't want to hear it, But that's because to me, I am so connected to this music was birthed out of the experience of some people who were not on a Carnival cruise ship who came to America. Okay,
Right.
that would be that's just not giving credit to the harshness and the agony of the people, the African people who were brought to this country, and this music and how it was birthed and how it expresses so much sorrow, hope, faith, joy, all of these things. And for me, as I listen to ensembles, I can almost tell, like I'm sure anybody else could tell, how informed somebody might be about a piece, because, it is just as evident if you can see someone singing in a foreign language and you can tell they don't know what they're singing,
Mhm.
they have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's not kids' fault either. It's more so conductors not sometimes digging deep enough, you know.
Mhm. Or doing the piece without even well because here's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to play devil's advocate. Let's say because I agree, and if the access to a person who can help you and your choir understand those things is there, absolutely use it. But now let's say I'm a choir director at a 2A high school in the
Mhm,
4 hours from any of the nearest city, and there's no college professor. There's no is they might what I'm afraid of. Let's just put it this way: is that
mhm.
people might just decide to not do that music at all.
At
Um,
all.
yeah, and so and I think that would also be so the way you described it, doing it with no context and no understanding of the history is not a good idea. We shouldn't do that. But at the same time, I hesitate to say it's either you do all of that research or you don't do the music at all. I think that would make me nervous too.
Yeah,
because I don't want,
I agree.
because I don't want those choirs in the middle of in the middle of the Midwest with nobody who looks different from me anywhere nearby,
Right.
making their curriculums musically even wider than they are already are. Because
Yeah.
because I think it's to the benefit of every kid,
Yes, I do too.
regardless of their skin color, to experience music that is
Of a
from a culture that's not theirs.
Yes, because
Mhm.
to me that's so limiting. Because most of the time we come from one cultural background, so that means you're only allowed to sing music from that particular. How educating is that?
Right.
I mean, absolutely not. And then let me go back a little bit and say that there are people who are doing exactly what I think they should do, which is to go out and to find the resources they need to find. I think I think that people should not run away from the music by any means. It is extremely important, not just to Black people, but to our history. And I didn't say my history. I didn't say your history. I said our history.
Hmm.
That means American history. That's a part of American history.
Right.
Kinda. It is, and we can't ignore it. We cannot by any means. But we to show and to say and validate it and say it's important. That's when we go in and do the extra work
Right.
behind it. But as you said earlier, it is so important for students, no matter if they're in rural Missouri or wherever, rural Iowa, wherever, they should have this experience of singing this music.
Hmm.
They should have the experience of singing all kinds of music, and music of different languages. I mean, it's just an appreciation of art at its basis.
Hmm.
I mean, art of so many different forms. But to say that, you know, white people shouldn't perform this music or Black people shouldn't perform Handel, that sounds as ridiculous as it sounds to you. I'm sure it's ridiculous.
Right. Well, and that's what's interesting about the way this conversation has evolved is that there are very few, no, really, no, I can't think of any folks that are making the argument that Black people shouldn't sing Handel.
Hmm.
It seems it's directed at white people,
Ah,
as we are the ones who should be really careful with what type of music. And it's not just about what we sing; it's whether or not we arrange a piece or whether or not we, um, you know, write a song in a style of or
hmm,
something else. And of course, this all, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of or the doctrine of called critical race theory. Are you familiar with that?
no, I don't think so.
Okay, so it's I mean it would be exist everywhere on your campus in every department probably, but just not always be called that.
Okay.
Which is that if in order to look at any issue of race, you have to look at it first through a who which group oppressed who
I see.
um,
Yes.
lens before you take any kind of analysis out of it. So the
Yeah.
step one is figure out which group of people did the oppression. Forget about whether or not the individuals that you're talking about did the oppressing. It's the group, and of course, in race theory, it's about the skin color.
I see.
And so that to me, this is something I've studied quite a bit. And I lay most of this issue at the feet of that kind of an ideology,
Mhm, mhm.
because it's kind of like so I'll take it away from race for a second so we can understand this in a different way. Like if I were to say men are taller than women, and
Mhm.
somebody were to then say, "No, that's not true. I know a woman who's way taller than you." Then you get confused for a second. You're like, "No, that's not what I said. I didn't say that all men are taller than every single woman." So it's this conflation of what a group has done statistically over time versus what individuals in those groups
Yes.
might be like. And so I think with this cultural appropriation, because that's basically what it is that we're talking about with this
Yep.
conversation about appropriating a culture, we're doing a lot of only talking about the group as an average or as an aggregate, as if there's some hive of white people and there's some
Mhm.
hive of Black people, and they all interact with each other in the same way. There's no so there's no black people that disagree with each other, and there's no white people that disagree with each other about anything of substance. And so that's what it seems like to me. And then when we get into the music topic, it doesn't seem to be something that is how do I say this, universally. It's not a concept that's universally applied. Let me just put it that way. Do you think that's fair? Feel free to tell me if it's not.
As I think about that, I often think about how music itself, especially if it's birthed out of any kind of culture, it has a way of people feel very personal about it.
Mm-hmm.
It very personal about it, and they do take it as if this is a music that means a lot to me. They won't say it belongs to them, but they'll say it means a lot to them. And when that happens, oftentimes it is implying that it doesn't mean a lot to other people.
That's a good point.
And it does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. The way you treat it might be differently, but it does mean a lot to other people. I mean, I'm assuming you perform African American music or music of other styles because you think. Tell me why. Why do you?
Why would I?
Yeah.
Why
do you?
Because I like it, and because I feel like it's a good opportunity, especially if I'm in the context of with my students at the school. It's a good opportunity to teach them about history. It's a good opportunity to teach them about culture, but mostly, since you asked me personally, I choose it because I like the music and I think it's good for the kids to sing it. And
do you ever think of it as it's is it the music itself that you really like, or is it sometimes because it's by an African American composer, or if it's arranged by a white composer, or does it even matter, or if it's arranged by someone outside of that particular culture? That's kind of what I'm asking. Outside of
that's a good question, and for me, and this was, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to my talk with Jason Ferdinand on this show,
Mm-hmm.
but this is something that he and I talked about a little bit too in that conversation, where for me personally, this kind of that question pulls up the old "I don't see color" thing, which we're not supposed to say anymore. That's criticized now because. To be honest, it's criticized because people who criticize it put up a straw man and then attack the straw man,
Right.
Which is that you can't say you don't see color, because what that just means is you don't appreciate the struggle that the people that you're talking about have been through. And I say, well, no, that's not what it means at all. It means that that's not what I use to determine the value of something.
Exactly.
And that to me is not a confusing concept. So if I say I don't see color, if I say it, and I don't say it anymore because I know that I'll be criticized. I say it on this show because I'm the boss of the show, so I can say whatever I want. But that's what that means. And so when you ask me when I choose the music, I choose them so. For example, if I'm going to choose a spiritual arrangement, it needs to be a really good spiritual arrangement. Like it needs to be something that I would put in front of my kids regardless. And there have been, and this is something I was going to ask you about later anyway, I've seen really good spiritual arrangements by white arrangers.
And so have I.
And yes, yeah. And honestly, when because again, the I don't see color thing was considered to be the progressive thing to say when I was coming up, in the 90s, when I was in college. That was the thing that all the liberals and progressive types would say, is that no, it's I don't see your skin color. And so I was raised to look at the music first, to look at the music, the notes and the rhythms. What's it going to do to the kids' range? What's it going to do to their music theory knowledge? What's it going to do to their vocal skills when I pick that music? And
programming,
right?
I mean, that people don't want to say things like that, and I'm never. I think a lot of people, and I threw that question around on you because I knew you could answer it better than I could. But I also knew that you had an opinion about it too, so that's why I threw it back at you. But looking at all of those aspects you mentioned, is this something that's appropriate for my ensemble? Is it an actual good arrangement from your opinion? And you have been doing this a long time. You've seen good, bad, and ugly, I'm sure.
Hmm.
But also, and we don't use the term authentic anymore because who can define that? Um, and I'm going to jump topics just a little bit because just from the word authentic, it made me think of something. I hope people understand, even in the African American sacred world, that some Black people will hear what we call concert gospel and consider that's not authentic music. That's not authentic gospel music
Hmm.
by any means. Got it?
Yep.
And they'll listen to it, and it'll be arranged by Brandon Boyd, and they'll think a white person has arranged it because it's just,
Right.
got it. Now,
Yeah.
a white person or someone else, who's not as familiar with the particular culture, will listen to it and say, "Oh my goodness, I love that spiritual. I love that gospel song you wrote." Okay, and of course, we're going back to it. It's a spiritual arrangement. It's a spiritual that has influences of the gospel tradition. But all of these opinions, as you were talking about Sperry and all of these opinions about this music will never end. We know that. But honestly, it is really boils down to what you as a conductor, you feel comfortable choosing for your ensemble. And is it accessible for your ensemble? Is your ensemble mature enough to handle the literature?
Uh-huh.
Mature enough to understand the literature? And that's why. But there's so many songs, especially of the African American tradition. There's so many songs that are accessible for all kinds of ensembles.
Hmm.
That it doesn't always have to be the latest thing that was published to perform.
Right. Yeah. And, it's interesting. Because I agree. I think you have to, as an educator, if we aren't looking at those types of things first, then we aren't putting our kids' intellectual growth and their spiritual growth, musical growth, whatever it is that we're in charge of in our position first.
First.
Then if we aren't doing that, then what we're putting first is some kind of a social agenda that we believe in.
Yes.
And I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate. I've seen a lot of debates about that is actually what we should be doing. Our main role as choral directors for a lot of people right now is to make social change.
Yeah, and make social statements.
Make social statements, and there is a school of thought that believes that in the choral profession's days of being the term I use is being a standing singing art museum are over, and that that every concert, every performance should send a message in no uncertain terms about what kids or people or whoever should believe. And I don't necessarily believe that there's no role for that. I think that
Right.
if that's why you want to start like a choir organization and a community choir to uh, save the planet or
Yeah.
whatever it is, then you should do that, and that's fine. But I think that we
Right.
shouldn't. My personal opinion is that we shouldn't get rid of the museum because we are the ones keeping an art form alive.
Right.
And without that museum, it dies
True.
in the
True. And I
in the
think,
long run.
yeah, and I agree. I mean, and I think there is a certain percentage of what our function is as choral conductors, as choral ensembles. But I don't think, and the thing we really have to do is be so flexible. And because there are times we have to put on different hats,
Hmm.
and there are times where we have to respond to certain events around the world, certain events within our own schools, and that allows us to be flexible. But you can't say that, in the public school setting, especially 95% of my role is for social justice. Well, your role really is to educate.
Hmm.
It is to educate from many different perspectives, but it's to teach literacy. It is to teach all kinds of things, vocal technique, and that can also be a part of it, but can't be the sum total of it.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah. No.
Ask me.
I no. So the social justice idea. If we are the arbiters, so to speak, as of what it means to what social justice even means to our students and to our communities, then we perform. I think we might be running the risk of some pretty heavy confirmation bias where we assume that we have the moral high ground, and,
Mhm.
and everything that we present in the concert is going to be uh, agreed with, and we're putting ourselves in these positions where if they don't agree, well, they're shitty people anyway.
Right.
Well, no, actually, there's lots of things that people of good faith on two different sides of an issue could see
Absolutely.
completely differently. And when we go down this social justice kind of as a in the choir classroom road, I think most of
Right.
our profession is still they still think of themselves as music teachers first.
Mhm.
But these ideas are becoming more and more
More and more prevalent.
more and more
Yeah.
popular, and so I think it's
Absolutely.
worth kind of talking through them. But well, I'll just take an example right out of the news headlines to illustrate this. So I don't really make my ideas about things that go on in the news very private. I'm an open book, so I don't really care to talk about these kinds of things. But um, immigration is a really big topic in our political scene right now. Well,
Absolutely.
I happen to think that immigration should be relatively unrestricted, and whoever wants to come to across humans should be allowed to move where they want to move, as long as they're following the rules of wherever it is that they're going, and paying their
Mhm.
taxes or whatever it is that they should do. So that being said, I'm very much against a Trump building a wall, for example. Okay,
Mhm.
I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's smart. Doesn't make any sense. I can't. But
Mhm.
the way we've been taught to argue against that wall is to call the people who want the wall a racist.
Mhm.
And there are some people who that's why they want a wall. But you could have a good faith argument against mine and say, no, no, it has nothing to do with the skin color of the person.
Right.
I'm afraid if we get too many people past, let's say we should get X people a year that are allowed to come here, and right now we have X plus 20 million, and
Yeah.
if that keeps happening, then this economic bad thing will happen, and this economic bad thing will happen. Now, I think they're wrong. I don't think those bad
Mhm.
things that they think will happen, but you could make a good faith argument on both sides of that have nothing to do with either person being a bad person. You could just disagree on how to interpret the economic information. And so a lot of the social justice topics out there, I feel like fit into a similar category. So I'm a little bit worried about us going down that road.
Yeah, me too. And my hope is that people will keep humanity first.
Hmm.
Keeping accepting people for who they are first. And love can be defined many, 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 many different ways. But keeping the essence of love as what it is that we run with when you term social justice. I
Hmm.
mean, giving everybody a fair chance at the table, you know, and I think from that approach, it's a much more safe approach. I mean, no one is should be harmed or should be looked down upon for lifting up others, even if they don't look like you,
Hmm.
if they don't walk like you, or they're not you. Um, and I think that is the safest role, because when you start bringing in, your own biases, and you're starting, you know, we work with developing minds, young people who are developing their ideas about the world, and they're some of them are brilliant and can think for themselves.
Hmm.
Some of them do need our help.
Right.
A lot of them do. But what they need us to do is to show love and compassion and concern for all mankind. That's what they
Hmm.
need for us to do. And when we don't demonstrate that, they notice that too.
Right.
And I'm thinking of things in my mind now where there have been times when people around this topics that we've been talking about today, where people have kind of lashed out at people who I don't think are bad people.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think are wonderful people, and who are doing wonderful things. And their efforts kind of reminds me of another topic I learned in grad school called intention versus function. Their intention was completely wonderful.
Hmm.
I mean, that's their intention. But how it functioned to somebody, maybe just one person, maybe two people, maybe a group of people, completely different than the intention.
Uh-huh. Now,
Uh,
what the one of the ones that comes to my mind would be the this Ron Keen's Harriet Tubman piece that
Absolutely.
made a big splash online,
Hmm.
and you and I chatted about that a little bit as it was going down.
Hmm.
But that, for those of you who don't know, that Ron Keen put out would you say it's like a narrative choral piece of the Harriet Tubman story, and some,
Yeah.
I think it quoted some spirituals in there, and
And he's not the first to do something quite similar to that. Renee Boyer has another one. I can't think of the exact name of it.
okay,
But there's, I mean, they have similarities. They're geared towards a particular audience or developmental voices, or it wouldn't, it's not necessarily for the London Symphony Orchestra chorus. That's not what it's, necessarily geared for. Um, but yes.
right, and of course he was criticized very heavily. In fact, even a conductor wanting his music to be pulled from the publisher's website and an apology to be issued, partly because of what you just described. Although in that criticism was very little attention was paid to the intent at all. It
Mhm.
was immediately considered to be appropriation. One of the things I remember reading about that story was that one of the consensuses that I saw creeping up was that that story does not belong to Ron Keen to tell, and
Yeah.
um, and I found that to be a struggle to understand and to wrap my head around. If people have the goal at any point in human future, so in our children's lifetimes or grandchildren's lifetimes, ever in the future, if our goal is to be one human family ever, then at some point those have to stop being stories that belong to a skin color. They
Absolutely.
have to be
I totally agree.
they have to be stories that belong to humans, about because
Absolutely.
that's how we learn about history. We learn about evil things that have been done in the past and how to prevent them by talking about them.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I will say I read these things while I was in Bolivia. I was I was just happened to pass through Facebook and see some things, and I decided to take a deeper look. I see a lot of things on Facebook that I pass by quite quickly,
Uh-huh.
because I think to myself, okay, a person puts that out there today, and then tomorrow their minds completely change. They're not mad anymore. They're not,
Right.
so they go and delete it. But my opinion of them now is, what I saw is what I believe they believe for the rest of their days on earth. So I don't take everything that's written on the internet to be Bible by any means, but um when you say that this story is, not you, but when it's said that it's not for him to tell, it kind of jars me a little bit, because back to the point of, it doesn't belong to one people. In my opinion,
Hmm.
I'm assuming that's why you invited me today, because you cared a little bit about my opinion. But
Yes.
my opinion is that it does not belong to one person or one group of people. I will say those group of people have helped to change history
Hmm.
and have made history. But what we should do is find what we can celebrate out of that music. And what another thing I thought about is, if you don't find merit in the music or the musical choices that are made in an arrangement or whatever, you do what we all do. You pass by it and move on with your life. You
Right.
know,
You don't buy
we don't buy
it. You
everything.
don't buy it.
We
Yeah.
pick out. No,
Right.
don't buy it.
Mhm.
uh, and you move on. And some people, maybe their issue is that it's being bought. Is that the issue?
For some people.
That it's making money?
Mhm.
How much money is it making? Let's really talk dollars. It's not
Right.
making it.
No,
Okay.
it's not paying anybody's mortgage.
It's not.
No.
And when you find people like this, and I don't know him personally, I don't know even Spirit personally, I don't know a lot of these people personally,
Hmm.
but I tell you one of the things, these people do, I believe, care about the music, and I do believe they've done research.
Right.
Now, what they may not have is all of the experience that somebody like, hey, me, okay, I grew up in church all of my life, but I was drugged there most of the time. It wasn't necessarily like a 3-year-old. I'm just, hey, mom, I'm going to church. This was just a part of my culture. So it was a gift to me.
Hmm.
Uh, um, But those people who didn't have that, who weren't fortunate to have those kinds of experiences, have done what they can do. I'm sure they're not going to spend 24 hours a day looking up every aspect of it, but it has inspired them in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do believe. Every time I see it, whether I like it or don't like it, I say, this person has been inspired by this music. There are a lot of things that I think are a little, they're a little, I don't know if I want to say that publicly, but they're just a little. Some can be a little too playful for a deep river. You know what I
Right.
mean? But it's. We may have to edit this part because I'm not quite sure that I can say it clearly. But I don't want to silence anybody's voice. I don't want to silence anybody's voice who's not intentionally doing. I mean, these people are not trying to do anything wrong by taking music that is of another culture and trying to share their expression through music, and that's I think that's their right. But finding, it's back to the way you handle things,
Mm-hmm.
and I do believe that things like that maybe could have been handled a little differently if I really, really cared about that particular topic. And many times, if I have something that I want to say to Chris Muntz, I'm going to call Chris Muntz, and it should probably stay right between Chris Muntz and me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure it can be handled there.
That's
But
what adults do.
Yeah. But when you include other people in, it's called an audience. I mean, and anytime we have an audience, I think we entertain.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And people and audiences do what they do.
Right.
Just like the black church. You're not going to say the Lord is good, and the black person ain't going to say amen every day, all day. They're going to respond. And many times I see things like this, but the way people respond shows a lot about their character.
Mm-hmm.
And at the forefront of who we are, we should be people who care about each other. Yes, we care about this music, but more than anything, we care about each other. That's most important. The music is down the line,
right?
But how we care about each other and humanity is just more important than anything.
I want us to dig a little bit deeper on taking just this away from specifically the debacle with Ron and his Harriet Tubman piece, but zoom out a little bit culturally to just, let's say, and keep the idea though of a Harriet Tubman story, and how important that story is to tell because of a variety of reasons, historical, but also it's a story that has a certain underlying moral to it that is important to teach a generation of kids about those certain types of bravery and certain types of what you're willing to courage and put it, what you're
wisdom,
and what you're willing to put on the line for something you believe in.
And she's a woman, I mean, how important it is for us to see that this is a woman who identified as a woman, and she had courage that we are hoping that inspires our young people today, women, men, black, white, trans, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because a woman who could lead people, I mean, literally tell you, if you don't come with me, you dead. You know what I mean? That is a lot of courage,
right?
And it wasn't just for that line of folk that she was carrying with her.
Mm-hmm.
This was to inspire others to come out of a place of darkness and sorrow, which we had been in for a number of over 200 years or so. And so this story of a woman, an African-American woman, can be told by anybody, because there are more Harriet Tubmans there's a Harriet Tubman in every race.
Uh-huh.
In every race.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this is that even if you're a critical race theorist who believes that the white race is the historical oppressor of all time, and it is the source of all evil on the planet, then if that's your logic, then you would want white people talking about those stories because you would want them to learn. So again, if your goal was to ever be a human family, then you would want those stories to be told by everyone to everyone all the time, because it would help to grow this social justice idea that that I believe in. I believe I just define it differently than some people do, in the sense that I don't like defining people by groups. I'm more interested in defining individuals by their actions, and not defining people by things that they did not choose at birth.
Right.
Because to me that doesn't logically hold as any way to evaluate a person. Are the characteristics
Yes.
that they came out of their mother with? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So here's a thought experiment that we can play. So with this Harriet Tubman idea, of course, she is, most people don't, or most people know the story, but she was instrumental in getting people to be liberated from slavery, right? So let's just put it that way. So one of the sources of this problem, in my opinion, is the way we are taught in our school system about slavery. And that's one of the way we're taught about that topic kind of lends to some of these logical misconclusions, in my opinion. So here's the thought experiment for you. In your opinion, why is slavery wrong?
Well, slavery is wrong because it is the thought that someone belongs to someone else,
Mm-hmm.
that they are a product of someone else, that they are controlled by someone else, they're manipulated by someone else, and no matter what you give them, you will never be able to pay them for that type of of taking away from their humanity in that way. You'll never be. I don't care if you say, well, I provided you housing, I provided you food, I gave you land to live on.
Mm-hmm.
And you're taking someone's humanity away when you enslave them. And typically there's an enslavement because there's something that is being gained that is much greater from the oppressor,
Uh-huh.
from the one who's oppressed. No matter what it is, you can say, well, you were in house, you were inside, and you did just the cleaning work, and you had an opportunity to eat better than people who were out on the field. No, 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 no. You're taking someone's freedom, and that's just what we were born to be, or to be free humans. That's why we're no longer attached to our mother and father, or mother with an umbilical cord, because we're free.
Right. I completely agree with that answer. And what I find interesting is that nowhere in your answer is definitions of why slavery is wrong based on race.
Absolutely not. I don't have. It's not based on
It's
race.
right.
But what I don't think some people even understand is that many Africans were enslaved by other Africans.
Yes, that
And
is accurate.
and so it's, yes, of course it doesn't compare to the number of people who were affected
Right.
by white Americans or white people, but just keeping that in mind. And I'm not going back to, I know that conversation not going that direction, but it doesn't always have to do with race, because there are people who enslave people even in their marriages.
Yes.
You know,
That's a
I
good
mean,
point.
this is just real deal.
Yeah, and I think so. What I meant by the, I feel like there's some disconnect in the way we're taught about this. Is typically American kids are taught about slavery starting with the American slave trade,
Yeah.
and so what that does, if you're looking at it with 2019 goggles back at the last few hundred years, and you're taught about slavery starting in 19 or 20 or whatever, then you're going to look back at it with a very zoomed in lack of perspective on slavery as a topic. Now, of course, we should in American schools talk about the American slave trade and its
Absolutely.
and its specific atrocities, which were new to
Yeah.
the slave trade at that time.
Mhm.
There were new things, but it should be taught as, in my opinion, as something that is 8 to 10,000 years old at least, that we know of, and that,
And how many other cultures were affected by it as well?
right, and how pervasive it was. And one thing we're never taught about, and we're
Mhm.
never taught about at all, is that the entire continent of Europe through the Middle
Mhm.
Ages was a
Absolutely.
slave continent. They were quite literally owned by their feudal lords. You had no
Mhm.
rights to your property. You had no rights to your self determination if you were a serf on, Lord Farquhar's, land or whatever.
Right.
We're not taught about slavery in a broader context, which, in my opinion, if we were, we would be led to having conversations with kids about not slavery's not wrong because white people did it to black people. Slavery's wrong because humans own themselves. And for you to take that from them is akin to murder on a scale where so let's say if you murder someone, you're taking all of their life from them. But if you enslave someone, you're taking however many years from them that they would have been able to determine their own path, determine their own life.
Yep.
And so we would be having more philosophical questions about not just what happened in America, but why is slavery wrong? And the reason I think that's important is because let me put it this way. If we don't talk about those kinds of things, in my opinion, we are more at risk of having history repeat itself. And I don't think that the slave trade's coming back in that sense, but we won't be able to defend to someone, well, what's so wrong with slavery? Why do we care that there's still slavery going on in some remote parts of Asia? What's the big deal? It doesn't affect us. Well, so I think the reason I went off on that rabbit hole is I feel like there is some connection with the cultural appropriation conversation that makes me hint at or makes me believe that part of that misconception is there because we don't have a broader historical context of how humans have mistreated each other over the course of time. Yeah. And and how far back are you going to go to determine where the culture started and where it ended? White people enslaved other white people for thousands of years. In fact, what's interesting, I don't know if you know about this, but that one of the unique contributions, I don't want to say contributions since it's so evil, but one of the unique contributions of the American slave trade was really for the first time in history, slavery was justified by race. That was kind of a new thing. And it was because before that it was tribal. So you could justify being a Viking tribe who could conquer the next Viking tribe and take their women as slaves. They're all Vikings, but you justified it because your tribe won and you could take that over. And it was really kind of a new idea that, that a white person could start to justify that they owned another person whose skin color was different than theirs, because this is amazing if you dig into it and start reading it. They were learning, the white people at the time were learning in school, like from their science teachers, why black people were not even the same species as them. And so it's not like they would do things like show cranial measurements and show like the dimensions of the jawline and all these different things as proof that, it's not bad that you own them because they're not human. It's like, you own other animals too. That's how they were being taught. And so they were using this for the first time as like a justification for it. And so to me, what we should be talking about is the types of issues that would lead someone to believe that they, like you were saying, I'm going to take this all the way back to what you said before, have the right to shut someone down, to silence them, to own them. If we are thinking humanity first, then we'll never go back down that road.
No. True. Absolutely.
I know. I just dumped a bunch of stuff.
No, but you taught me something too. So I had no idea of those intricate little levels in which this has just been embedded into a society or into a group of people. Because I'm taking your word for it, but to me it explains why something so wrong seems so right.
Oh, to the people back then.
Yeah.
I
mean, because this has literally been passed down and been and obviously has been really infiltrated in people's minds and thoughts and beliefs and philosophies about a race, a group of people, because that's obviously what it has become, and that's what most people know it about. I mean, identify it as a race issue.
Right. And it is now, like, so it's not. I'm not trying to
Oh yeah.
say. I'm not trying to
Oh
say
yeah,
that it's
definitely
not.
is.
But I'm just trying to give that historical context of that. For most of human history, slavery was not a racial thing. It
Right.
was a whoever is the strongest gets to take the slaves kind of a thing. And of course, when you get through kind of colonial Europe, they were the strong ones militarily, and continued a process or a practice that their ancestors had done. It was all very, very normal. And of course, if you go to kindergarten in a little one-room schoolhouse and you're taught from the time you're barely able to speak that, well, here's our race and this is their race, and they're not quite human, they're almost human, but this is,
Right.
and here's your teacher that you trust, and you grow a learning
Right.
up. And it's one of the things that's interesting to me is that I see a lot that people pointing out the hypocrisy of even like the Declaration of Independence and saying that all men are created for equal, but then they own slaves. Well, what people are missing in that analysis is that they weren't taught at the time that those are also men. So
Right.
so
They're animals.
so it's hypocritical, yes. They didn't see people as equals, and so they weren't talking about. It's true to say they weren't talking about all
Right.
men. They were talking, but that's using our definition now. And so
Right.
what I think is beautiful about that context is then you look back at it and you say, you know what? Slavery had existed for however many thousands of years we can record history. And
Mhm.
then this country came along, even though it was part of that mess. It within 100 years or so, people started noticing that that was a huge contradiction. They started,
Yeah.
and this is I actually learned this. And did you learn any of the or watch any of the 1619 project stuff on New York Times blog? Did you come
Mm-mm.
across
No,
that?
I haven't.
It's a documentary about the history of slavery, and it's written by it's a bunch of essays and
Hmm.
research trying to argue that we should be teaching history with that as if the United States started in 1619, not 1776, and that we should start the history
Wow.
there and include slavery as
Hmm.
part of the story. Which at first, and I'm going to admit that when I first saw that, my first instinct was, you know what, this is just going to be a bunch more critical race theory stuff, and it's just going to be about how evil white people are. But because I don't let myself prejudge, I listened to the whole thing, and I disagreed with some of the analysis in there, but for the most part, it's really, really well done. And one of the things that I thought was really good about it was that I started thinking about, you know what, they should tell more of these stories in school. They should. Now, but they should also do it in context. So that we're not teaching people that to look back 200 years ago from now and apply 2019 goggles to people in 1720, because
Hmm.
that's not fair, because they
No.
didn't know what we know now.
True.
They didn't know what we know now. So, but to look at it and with the motivation of trying to learn from their mistakes, so that we don't make the same mistakes
Right.
today.
Same mistakes
If
again.
that's your motivation, then yes, we should tell all those stories. But if your
Hmm.
motivation is to demonize people today, then
Hmm.
that's not productive, in my opinion.
I, I'm with you.
And
I'm with
what I'll say, what I'll say too, is that this is again just out there, but I think that's why we are stuck with President Donald Trump right now. I personally believe that that's why. Oh yeah, you don't want to say it. That's okay. I'll say it because
you.
people have been taught this history, and because people are like white people are that maybe aren't as analytical as I am about these kinds of things. They go, wait a minute, I don't know. My ancestors didn't own any slaves. I've never said a mean thing to any black person ever.
Hmm.
I'm not racist, and I
Hmm.
resent you for calling me racist. So I'm going to go vote for the guy who says I'm pretty cool. It,
I think it's even funnier though. Everybody has so many different value systems, and I can understand that because I have mine and you have yours.
Mhm.
But I was talking to some people that I genuinely love. I mean, when I say love, I mean love, and they're not my parents. Um, uh, and they told me that they voted for Donald Trump because he said the magic word.
Okay.
You know what the magic word was?
Oh,
It was God.
Really?
He was the one who professed God, and that was like, to me, I go, when? I mean, okay, yes, okay,
Yeah, I've heard him. I've heard him try
okay.
to. I've heard him try to court the evangelical vote. Yeah, that's true.
Well, and that was enough for that person, because they said that God would take care of the rest.
Okay.
And then I think I mentioned that I love these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do.
Yeah.
I do love these people. At that time, part of me was just really shocked, because there's so many wonderful things about these people, and in that moment, I thought to myself, that's just incredible. That was the one thing that got at your vote. Do you know any of the things that they didn't know anything else, that
Mm-hmm.
they weren't even concerned with those things
Right. Yeah,
by any means.
it's
And
pretty interesting.
you ask me, you might say, are they black? Are they white? But the funny part about it is, one's black and one's white,
Uh-huh.
and they're a married couple.
Yeah.
And so, with that being said, I don't share a lot of my political views, only because I don't want to publicly say this, but I'm going to publicly say this. Uh, uh, I'm really into music, and I'm not as into politics as others are. Do I care about Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. I think, but I will say, I have been more into politics in the last 3 or 4 years
Mm-hmm.
than I have ever been. I've been more interested in hearing and watching and seeing what people value, and thinking about our Constitution more, and thinking about the roles of our political leaders, and thinking about the roles of our teachers and our communities, our churches, our ministers, our synagogues. I've been thinking a whole lot more, and I'm saying that to say, because I'm really making a transfer, is that even going through a lot of our topics today, a lot of things that happen that some people would qualify as bad, to me, do happen for a reason. Um, and if we're smart, we learn from those things, or we try to do better the next time. And if the next time is not a specific day, but for the rest of your days on planet Earth, that's our responsibility. Is to learn from the actions of others, to say, hey, I am not like this person. I am very different. Well, how do you know that? How do we know that? I mean, really demonstrate for us
Mm-hmm.
that this is who you are, and this is who you want to be, and this is how you view me, and this is how you view the man who was not born in this particular country. And I have, even with the events, with the piece we talked about today, the Harriet Tubman piece, those who feel one way, I think, shared all of their opinions, but the ones who really didn't, I didn't see as many opinions.
Because they're afraid.
That bothers me,
Yeah.
though. That's when our voice should be, through compassion, we share.
Uh-huh.
That's what we should do.
And we give
We
each
should
other the.
share, and we should then. But it all. Say it again.
I was just gonna say, and we give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
That's what I see missing online when we have these conversations.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely. And I understand people say, I don't want to get in that because, I don't want to, and there are a lot of reasons people don't want to get into it. But I don't think there's anything at all wrong with standing up for what you think is right, especially if you speak it through compassion, through love,
Mhm.
through a voice for humanity. That's our responsibility. If someone's upset with you for that, hey, that's okay. Take a NyQuil, go to sleep, wake up the next day, maybe they'll be better.
Right. It's true, and I feel like uh, I'm going to share an example of a story that I heard in that 1619. I listened to the podcast version of the essays, um, and there was a girl a woman who told a black woman told a story from her childhood, where she was in a classroom in probably
Hmm.
like the 1980s in America, and most of the kids in her class were white, and the teacher, well intentioned, even by her admission in the story, she said, I don't think my teacher was trying to put me in an awkward position, but gave an assignment where the assignment was each kid was supposed to um, write a report on the country that their family came from, and draw a picture of the flag, and then do like what's the capital city, what's the population, all this kind of stuff. And of course, most of the white kids are able to trace their lineage to, say, Germany or Lithuania or Ireland or wherever. And so all the white kids were able to go home and ask their parents and ask their grandparents and do this. And she remembers making eye contact with the one other black kid in the room, and just feeling really, really embarrassed, because she knew that she didn't know. She knew that her family was from Africa somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but
Right.
because the records were destroyed for most
Yeah.
for most slaves that were brought over, she didn't know if it was Nigeria or South Africa
Yeah.
or
Sure.
wherever. And so she remembered that, and this is like her reading her essay in this podcast, and it was really interesting.
Wow.
She said, what I did was I made up an answer. I made up a country in Africa. I randomly picked one on the globe, and I looked up its flag, and I did the thing, and I got an A on the assignment. But I immediately felt ashamed, because I didn't know my country, but also because I lied, and I was put in that position by a teacher who wasn't trying to make me feel ashamed or make me feel isolated, but that was still the result. And so what I think is cool about a story like that is the way she told the story, by giving her teacher the benefit of the doubt. And I think as an adult, she's telling us that story and saying, my teacher hurt me in this way. She didn't mean to, but these are things we could learn from about the ways we teach kids now. And that might not be a good activity to ask, that kind of thing, and to, rather than accusing, and rather than saying, and so I put some of the choral conversations that we've been seeing online in that same category of, if the tone were more like the woman I just described, in talking about how, white conductor that did this piece or performed this piece without what I feel like as proper respect for it. I know you didn't mean to, like, and I know you didn't. You weren't trying to be offensive or whatever. But would you be willing to let me talk to you about the way that made me feel?
Yeah.
I think if we approached this topic that way, even online, this whole conversation would be going so differently.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It's kind of like what we're talking about right now. If people would have conversations, like actual conversations, they might be able to do that. As an arranger, what would you say are some possible end roads to this problem? And I'm going to call it a communication problem, because that's essentially what it is, a communication problem within our profession about how directors and arrangers and conductors should approach music from other cultures. If we don't fix the way we communicate, where could this go?
Well, it could eventually end up being where wonderful people like Ethan Sperry, who decide that, I'm getting so much backlash from my contributions that I'm deciding to, it could be people like that, or people who are wonderful at what they do. They could, feel very uncomfortable with making their contributions public, and most of the times they make that through publications. And that is going to be a major detriment to our field, because I must admit, I know more music through Ethan Sperry than I do through any other,
right,
about the music than I do other people. I'm sorry, I just do. I look at some of them, who else? Like we can think of a lot of different people who literally made, bring back tunes from Africa, or from parts of Africa, South Africa, who influence us, through their exploration. But if we don't start having this type of communication where um, uh, people get a chance to share that, no, I care about this as much as you do, and they don't need to defend themselves, though. I don't think they need to defend themselves. I just think they need an opportunity for people to understand that I care about this music and I value it, And for those who think, okay, well, I don't think it has any merit, then all I could say is publishers are looking for music all the time. Why don't you go ahead and contribute something that you think? That's my opinion. Now it's a little snarky, but it's serious. It is serious, because that is somehow how you make the biggest difference. If you want to go out and because I'll say this, I've been influenced by people who've done music, before I was born. A lot of the arrangements that I really value a lot, they influence me. I can look at some things that I do and say, wow, I like it because this particular person has done it. And that particular person that I value is a person who has some experience in the music and experience in the writing style and knows their audience. That's another thing, understand the audience that this music might be intended for.
Mm-hmm.
Got it? And because I can't think of many of my arrangements that would actually be sung in my home church. None.
Right.
None.
Yeah.
None. I can't think of one. And that's just because that, and I must say, when I write, I don't necessarily have them in mind. The influences from the being a part of that tradition has influenced what I do, but that's my way of taking this influence that you may never, ever, ever get to Greater Hopewell Baptist Church, but you may experience part of that musical heritage through the music that Brandon Boyd writes, that is mainly for choral ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
But that's our way of interconnecting this entire world. That's our responsibility. But what I really, really don't want to see is people feel as if their fire is extinguished because of others' opinions. And I must say, because we all have opinions, all the people on planet Earth have an opinion. I just don't want the ones who have maybe negative opinions to stop the wonderful work of people who are doing fantastic work. I still challenge people who are doing fantastic work to continue to do their homework,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe many of them are. And I believe they will continue to do their homework. And all I ask is for people to keep this openness about, how music inspires you. Don't let anybody take that away from you. You can't,
Right.
because that's what we continue to do as music educators every day of our lives, is try to inspire these young people to keep music in you, and to stay with it for a lifetime. If you want to be a conductor, go that route. If you want to be an arranger, go that route. If you want to be a composer, go that route. We're not trying to make anyone look this way. And it's more so of a wide view of the world, a wide spectrum of the world. And that's just, it's hard for me to say. And I mean, some person may listen to this and be angry. I'm not sure that I'm going to lose any sleep over it. But what I don't want people to do is to enslave people by taking people's freedoms away. Because you have a different opinion about them, their musical language, or any of those kinds of things. Unfortunately, that's not up to you. That's not up to you to judge. If you want to be that, go to a university, teach choral arranging, and then influence someone. Okay, do you have that right? You're paid to do that there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to leave it right there.
That's awesome. That's really well put. And I remind people too sometimes that without cultural appropriation, I'll call it cultural sharing.
Uh-huh.
But without that music, all we would have right now is monastic chant from 5,000 years ago.
Absolutely.
That's all we would have.
Absolutely.
And
that's all we would.
And because all the way you just described it in that last kind of paragraph of what you said was that your music that you write doesn't sound just like the music from your church, but it was influenced by the music from your church. And what you're creating is now something new that's Brandon Boyd's language. And somebody at some point in your life will come across Brandon Boyd's music and be influenced by it.
I hope.
You hope, yes, and hopefully people will find it on this podcast and get some, and they will come across your music and they'll be inspired by it, and they might be influenced by it and write something new that's not your music, but it's something that was influenced by your music, and that's how music works.
Yeah.
We all learn from things, and we borrow from certain things, and we take what we like,
Yeah.
and we don't take the other things we don't like, and we
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
I love it, and
You know,
I think this is an important topic. I appreciate you talking through it with me. I'm sorry I went all talking about Trump. I it's a thing. It drives me
oh, it's
nuts.
fine.
It drives me nuts. I
It's a thing. It exists. And if
yeah.
we act like it doesn't exist, then we are not human. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I'm kind of some of my motivation for talking about those things is like sometimes people will say they like my political posts on Twitter. I actually don't make political posts. I make anti-political posts. I hate
Mhm.
politics. I hate it. But what I feel like sometimes happens is we bring politics into everything we're doing to the point where we're now talking about it in the context of choral music. And I loved what you said. We'll wrap up with this, I think, because I want to bring back the audience's memory to something you said earlier when we were talking about politics, which was that you just really want to do music. And that's why you haven't thought a lot as much, maybe as much about politics as some people. And I think that's a healthy way to look at it, and that we could all maybe as in our profession use a healthy dose of remembering that we are musicians.
Mhm. That's our role.
Yeah,
That's my role, at least.
that's
And I don't think I'm going into politics, but who knows? You never know.
well, maybe you could start the first congressional choir.
Maybe so. That would be wonderful. And you know where I'm going to take that congressional choir?
Where's that?
To a prison.
Yes, that'd be a great idea. That would be a great idea. I think
You really want to understand, the oppressions of this country. Go to those who are oppressed
Mhm,
and those who have not had the fortunate side of life. Got it? That's where you go.
mhm.
And you go and talk to those individuals who have been, and that's a whole nother subject.
Yes.
But that's a place where to go and to really see that that's a big part of life in the U.S. that we kind of leave out,
Uh-huh.
because they're not visible. They're not walking past us every day in the grocery store.
Mhm.
That's what got you there. Is what our political system should be working towards to make sure that these people don't, that people don't get into this situation, and how to get people out of this situation. Because a lot of it is oppression.
It's oppression. It's oppression
Yeah.
from our politicians.
Absolutely.
And-
Some of us want to go to prison. Maybe we don't have to
and-
deal with this
right.
as much.
And if people would if they would just leave us alone, we'd probably be nicer to each other.
Absolutely. True. Oh my God.
Yeah, but you're right. That is a completely different podcast. I might have to start a non music podcast. We just talk about that. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. It's getting late, so I think we'll sign off. But I appreciate this. I think this has been very helpful, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you for sticking around to the end of the episode. This was a heady one, and if we accomplished nothing else in our conversation, Brandon and I hope we at least accomplished one thing, which is this: to help you think and see that this topic could be more complicated than just reading a story about somebody being accused of cultural appropriation on Facebook and watching everyone accumulate woke points. Because it's not that simple. There's always a story behind those stories, and there's always a person with intent behind those stories, and the intent matters. It's very important that we keep that in mind, and that's really, I think, the gist. If we had to boil down that 90-minute conversation between Brandon and I, that's what it came down to. Yes, we should try to do our research. Yes, we should try to lift up the culture that we are performing and or arranging. Of course that's true. And does everyone do a good job when they attempt it? No. But we should assume that they attempted it unless they gave us some reason to not assume that. And I think that's what's missing from the conversation ultimately, is we aren't giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And I think it's time we start. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation, and hopefully you feel some of those things about this topic. But if you don't, head over to Choralosophers on Facebook and let's talk about it. Let's continue to have a conversation. And or if you'd like to keep it private, send me an email at choralosophy@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to talk more with you about this. Finally, if you enjoyed the show, or if you didn't, please leave a rating and a comment on the podcast app that you listen on, and share, and go to the Facebook page, ideally, and find the page for this episode and share that with a comment about what you thought. These are all things that help me a lot spread the word with the show and avoid those pesky Facebook advertising costs. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you next time for the 21st episode of the Choralosophy Podcast.